You were once a baby. You laughed. You cried. You reached for things you didn't understand yet. You learned to recognize the sound of your mother's voice before you even knew what words meant. You took your first wobbly steps, fell down, and got back up. You said your very first word, and somewhere in your family, someone probably wrote down the date because it felt like a miracle. And yet, if you try right now to remember any of it, you can't. Not the moment you were born, not your first birthday, even though there are probably photos of you covered in cake, not the sound of your own name being said to you the 1,000th time. Most of us can't recall anything from before the age of 3 or 4. For many people, real, clear memories don't even start until closer to age 5 or 6. So where did those years go? You were there. You were awake. You were alive, experiencing the world every single day. But somehow, all of it vanished, like an entire chapter of your life was written and then quietly erased before you ever got the chance to read it. Here's the strange part. This isn't just something that happened to you. It happens to every single human being who has ever lived. Scientists even have a name for it. They call it infantile amnesia, the universal permanent gap in memory that covers the earliest years of every person's life. For over a century, this mystery has puzzled some of the greatest minds in psychology. Sigmund Freud was one of the first scientists to seriously study it, all the way back in the early 1900s. His theory was strange, even by his standards. He believed children buried their earliest memories on purpose, pushing them down into the unconscious mind because they were tangled up with forbidden, uncomfortable desires. Modern science has since shown Freud was almost completely wrong about why it happens. But here's the thing. He was right about one part of the puzzle. Something really is standing between the baby you once were and the adult you are now. So what is it really? Let's start with a fact that might surprise you. Babies are not blank slates. Babies do form memories, real ones. Researchers have shown that infants as young as 6 months old can remember a specific toy they played with days earlier. Show a 6-month-old baby an object, take it away, and bring it back after a few days, and their brain reacts differently than it would to something brand new. They recognize it. A 1-year-old can remember a specific game, a specific person, even a specific location for months at a time. So the memories are absolutely being created. Babies are constantly learning, storing, and reacting to their world exactly the way you'd expect a developing brain to do. Which means the real mystery isn't whether babies can remember things. The real mystery is why none of those memories survive into adulthood. And that's where things get genuinely fascinating. Deep inside your brain, there's a small, curved structure called the hippocampus. Think of it as your brain's filing cabinet for long-term memories. Every time you experience something meaningful, a conversation, a place, a face, a feeling, the hippocampus is the part of your brain responsible for taking that raw experience and filing it away so you can pull it back out later, sometimes decades afterward. But here's the catch. In a baby's brain, that filing cabinet isn't finished being built yet. The hippocampus continues developing for the first several years of life, long after a baby is born. And during that time, something remarkable and a little chaotic is happening inside it. New neurons are constantly being produced and added into the structure. Scientists call this process neurogenesis. Every single time a new neuron gets added to the hippocampus, it doesn't just join quietly. It can actually push into the existing web of connections, the very same connections that are holding old memories in place. Picture trying to keep a filing cabinet perfectly organized while someone keeps shoving brand new drawers into the middle of it, over and over again, without warning. Files get knocked loose, folders get shuffled out of order, some documents fall out completely and are never found again. That is essentially what is happening inside a baby's rapidly growing brain. Early memories are being filed away in real time, but the very system responsible for storing them is also under construction, rebuilding itself so aggressively and so quickly that it ends up erasing its own paper trail in the process. But neurogenesis is only half of this story. There's a second piece to the puzzle, and it has to do with something you take completely for granted today: language. Toddlers don't yet have the words to turn their experiences into a coherent story, and it turns out conscious long-term memory relies heavily on exactly that: narrative structure. A beginning, a middle, an end. I went to the park. I fell off the swing. Mom picked me up and gave me a hug. That simple structure is actually doing a lot of work behind the scenes. It's what allows your brain to compress a messy, overwhelming experience into something small enough to store and specific enough to retrieve years later. Without language, a toddler's early experiences don't get packaged that way. Instead, they exist more like scattered fragments: a sensation of warmth, a flash of color, a feeling of fear or comfort, the sound of a particular voice. Real experiences, genuinely felt and processed, but never stitched together into the kind of connected story your adult brain would later be able to search for and pull back up. By the time a child finally develops enough language to start building memories into full narratives, typically somewhere between ages 3 and 6, most of those early fragmented, wordless experiences have already faded beyond recovery. So here's the strange truth hiding underneath all of this. Those memories didn't disappear simply because you were too young to understand. Your brain wasn't failing at its job. It was doing something far more demanding. It was under massive construction, rewiring itself at an extraordinary pace, and that rewiring process left almost no early memories fully intact. And there's real experimental evidence backing this up. In one striking study, researchers looked at mice with faster-growing hippocampal neurons and found they showed more memory loss during infancy. Meanwhile, mice with slower-growing neuron growth held on to their early memories for noticeably longer. In other words, the very same process that makes a young brain so extraordinarily good at absorbing new information, rapid growth, constant rewiring, endless new connections, is the exact same process responsible for wiping the memory slate clean behind it. It's a trade-off: speed versus permanence, growth versus memory. And your brain, in those first few years, chose growth. So the next time someone asks if you remember being a baby, those first steps, that first word, the face of the person who rocked you to sleep, you don't have to feel like you're missing something broken inside you. The truth is far more interesting than that. It's not that those moments didn't matter. It's not that they weren't real or that they didn't shape you in ways you still carry today. It's that your brain, in its very first and most important act of survival, was too busy building itself into the mind you now have to stop and keep the receipts.